Knobcon coverage brought to you by Signal Sound and Befaco, Future Sound Systems, Low Gain Electronics, Steady State Fit, Funk and Expert Sleepers.
So Andrew from SSF, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. How are you?
Yeah, Steady State Fit with a bit of a surprise. 4 new modules in the works.
4 modules.
Yeah, so let's run down them. Let's have a quick kind of run down the 4 things. What are they? What do they do?
Definitely.
I'm hoping, I've heard chatter of a really interesting hi-hat symbol.
Right. Yep.
Seen some forum chat of and it's great because people love kicks. The Ultra kick, obviously fantastic, but then people being excited about other parts of the drums isn't always a thing. So it's nice when they're like, man, these hi-hats.
Right.
Give the hi-hat some love.
Yeah. As usual, it can be thought of as a hi-hat module, but it's really more of a
well, you don't do simple. You you put like systems in modules effectively.
Right, yeah. And this one's no different because it has basically like a ring modulation core to it with multiple oscillators that are cross-modulating each other at different levels.
Okay.
It's called the Metalloid Percussion. And you have this variant control which affects the different frequencies of this bank of oscillators, and the material changes like the FM bus that's affecting those oscillators.
Okay.
And you can trigger both separately or at the same time through normalizations. And right now, we're listening to both at the same time get output at this A output, and if you patch into B, you can separate those 2 sounds, and each sound has its own state variable filter, decay, bipolar attenuator on those filters.
I bet it makes a killer snare.
What's that?
I bet it makes a killer snare drum that you could kind of dull down a bit more of a deeper tone and then get a noisy kind of top on it. And
for sure, yeah. And then it has this level controls on A and B, and those are of course voltage controllable as well. But you can also choke one with the other one. Here, let me put the other trigger in there so we get a pattern going.
it's immediately clear. It's just got that flexibility of the rest of the entity range.
Right, yeah.
The Ultra Kick, the percussion that they've done videos for.
Right, and it really starts to like shine when you start modulating the filters.
Yeah, so this kind of chatter of an interesting hi-hat is immediately smashed by this now sounding like a full voice.
Right, yeah. I mean, like, you're basically like some of that like complex hi-hat things that you would do in a track, like building upon that. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that's the Metalloid. Not too much I'm going to change about this. I do want to make the triggers respond dynamically to gate amplitude. Yeah.
Yeah, like
that's
you could on the...
probably the one thing I want to change about it.
Yeah,
but,
okay.
Yeah, so that's coming out probably early 2024. But going back over here is the impulse dynamics, and that's what's going on down here on this screen. So right now it's getting hit with a pattern or trigger pattern from the ASQ over here, and you have voltage and manual control over the width. So you can patch gates and turn them into variable triggers and triggers into variable gates. It's got 3 different range modes. Short, which is in the audio range for when you want to experiment with pulse width modulation effects. Medium is your standard gates and triggers that you'd probably want to work with. And long is for very long gates. And there's an attenuator on that CV input. But then you also have a pulse out. You also have a envelope output. So you have pulse output, envelope output, and the envelope, instead of having a gate, you have an envelope with a variable decay. Okay. And there's also a VCA on that. So there's this dynamics output where you can dynamically control the level of the envelope or the gate or an external signal. And usually when you want to get dynamic gates, you got to patch that into a VCA that's controlled by a sample and hold. This one already has that all built in, so if I want to take an LFO, or let me put this in LFO mode and patch that into the into this level input. Now I can get dynamic gates and triggers, but in discrete steps.
Yeah, without, as you say, having to chain VCAs
without having to
into
go
VCAs.
and like do that huge patch thing. Yeah.
Does this build upon a bit of a Eurorack classic, the PPG, one of your early modules?
The PTG? No, I mean I just feel like this kind of module should exist.
Yeah, it should.
Because it's just that thing that like
well, like
you
your
need
kick
all the
drums
time.
responding dynamically, like they do hard and heavy and aggressive, but they can be really soft and delicate as well.
Right, yeah, and modules like the steady state gate, which will respond to a dynamic trigger gate, and also with the drum modules, because you want to get this stepped effect on your drums to get variation. So it's the kind of thing that,
It's the perfect thing to put in there, because it's different to telling people, like, hey, if you patch these other 3 modules in, you can do this cool velocity effect. It's
right,
like,
this one
just put it on there.
does
like,
it for you, yeah.
Which is why your designs are so dense and musical because of it.
Right.
That's really cool.
So I'm probably going to save this one to last because it's probably the most complex, but
Okay.
right here is the Ultra Random Redux.
Oh, I'm excited. Like the
Yeah.
Ultra Random is like classic random of the format.
Right, and so this is, this module basically addresses people like the favorites from the Ultra Random that people liked and what they didn't like. So what I did was I took out the internal clock, because everybody really there's plenty of clocking and sequencing.
I typically externally clocked mine.
Right, exactly. So you have 3 different clock inputs, one for the A sample hole, one for the B, and one for the flux. But they're cascaded normalization. So if I patch a trigger into A, it'll control everything. You can break that with B, and B will control the flux, or you can have separate triggers going in everything, right?
Yep.
We'll start with the random pulse. So instead of having the button to do the divisions, now it's on a rotary switch, and then you have your density control. Let me move some of these wires out of the way. So here's your pulses, really dense or sparse, and then you have your divisions, right? But I added this sync so that you can take whatever clock you're putting in, A or B or either or, it'll sync, like the randomness from the random pulses will randomize your clock.
Yeah.
So it'll be on or off based on...
And you'd have had to use logic to do that before.
It's just logic.
Yeah.
And so you can get like a random pulse based on an actual clock rather than just this free running pulse.
Yes, it becomes more like a probability control of a clock signal.
Exactly.
As opposed to like the kind of classic, truly running random gate.
But if you wanted that, you could just slap it into the free running mode and get the
I'm glad it's not one or the other.
Right.
Like that seems to be the thing with your designs, is have both.
Yeah, have both.
Like,
yeah. Options. Options are always great. And of course, that's normalized the random pulse into the integrator. It's a new integrator circuit, voltage controlled on that. It's not based on the Vactrol anymore. It's more of your expected linear type of integration, but it turns those random pulses into triangle waves. And
an integrator, for those that don't know, is like a slew. Right?
It's like a slew, yeah.
Like, think of it like a fluctuating random almost.
Yeah, I could even... So we'll get this guy going. So that's a very long... So all these gates that are coming out are being slewed. And
it's like holding some of the longer gates as well.
Yeah, exactly. So now I just sped it up. And now I'm changing that integration time to be faster.
Between a low and a high voltage is what the circuit's doing,
right? Yeah,
kind of think
it's
of it like
creating
a
a slope, like the integration. Yeah, it's the slope, right? So there's the integrator, and then there's a flux. The flux now has a control, just like the integrator. So the random flux, we need a clock for that. So we're going to clock it from this one. So this one, the random, right now it's being triggered pretty quickly, and I can make that very slow. So you get this random fluctuating voltage, right? Just like on the original.
Yep.
And there's a sum input with that, so you can take another signal and sum, and it'll overdrive it, and it has like a limiter in it, so it keeps it from surpassing like 5.5 volts.
So is that a little bit like if you were to put another LFO in, you could almost think of the fluctuating voltage like a bias? It's pushing up into the positive and negative rails and clipping above ends.
It's adding randomness to that, or you're choosing. It's kind of like where the probability distribution was on the original. Yeah.
But again, a bit like with the impulse dynamics, it's like you could patch that. Again, it's this like needing 3 or 4 modules. Like, you want to take an LFO and like mix it with another one and modulate in a VCA. And I just love this kind of put a signal in, take a signal out, and cool things have happened easily.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like modular synthesis is approaching this like modern era where like, we still want to patch, but it's nice to have these functions built in. Yeah,
and musical moments need to move quickly sometimes.
Right.
Like, I do have days where like I'll love nerding out on like building block surge-esque like the bits, but then other times I want to make music.
Right.
And I don't have to think like, what do I need to do to this LFO to get it to pan the way I want? Or it's really
totally cool. So I also took out the attenuators that were on the sample and holds, just because like
lots of things have attenuators on.
And I could fit more features in if I took them out. So now it's the sample and hold on A and B. They have 3 different modes. The normal bipolar mode, which is from the old Ultra Random, and then it has a rectified unipolar, so full wave rectification, and that also means you can put an external signal in, clock it at audio rates, and get full wave rectification on a signal.
Clock it high enough, there's no kind of downsample effect almost.
Right, and the third mode is that 50-50 half wave rectified version where you can, it's random 50-50 whether you get a random sample.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so that's the Ultra Random Redux, which takes us over to this one.
Yep.
So this is the Prime Modulator. It's a function generator. It's also an audio wave shaper. Takes a lot of the features that you're familiar with function generators. I tried to come up with ways to improve upon them. For instance, there's 3 different range modes. The short range is for when you're processing audio rate triggers or audio rates into the slew input, etc., for wave shaping.
Okay.
The range goes up to a little over 3 kilohertz, down to like 100 hertz for the audio rate, and that allows us it just reduces the cutting out of the signal that you're putting into it, right? Medium is basically like your standard envelope speed. The envelopes have the controls rather have an anti-log response. When you're trying to,
so you can dial in short and fast effectively.
Without it going from like 1 second to 10 seconds.
Well, I've done a lot of trying to tune in surge linear dual slopes on linear controls sometimes, and it's just, the range switch is going to help with that, and then the curve of the response as well.
Right. Let me turn on this envelope. So, rise and fall. Right now it's on this reset mode. So it's got your normal mode, and it has a reset mode that'll reset no matter where the cycle is. So on the attack, it's resetting.
Okay.
When there's a new trigger.
Some of the classic slopes won't reset in the rising edge, but will in the falling.
Right, and if you have it in AR mode, that's the classic, where it only resets on the fall.
Again, get both.
Yeah. And then it has this like pseudo like ADSR mode where, let me see if I can get this. As long as your decay isn't longer than your gate length going in, you get this like ADSR effect.
Oh, it's like a shared decay release control.
Yeah, and the sustain is like basically preset, like based on
like
your
a
input.
50% sustain sort of thing. Or
Roughly. So you can get like this ADSR thing happening, and if that's like cycling, it kind of like pumps on and off here, depending on what mode you're in. So like holding open, and when it's dropping, it's just like going into cycle mode. Yeah, and then there's a long range mode for really long. Let me turn it off the cycle there. You have independent shaping on the attack and the release, linear, log, exponential, all that. Normal stuff like CV on rise and fall, which are linearized CV on those, so they don't go crazy. FM, which it's not going to track volt per octave, but it is exponential. There's other features on this for manipulating audio for wave shaping, which I'll show you in a minute. But you get a gate for rising, falling, and ending. The ending is extended, so like when you're cycling, you know how like it'll give you like a stupid fast trigger.
Okay.
This one, it'll always go for the length of the attack phase of the rising phase, so you're always getting like a solid gate out of it.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, but it only triggers when the cycle ends.
Yeah.
And then there's a built-in VCA, a level VCA on the envelope. You have a positive envelope and a negative envelope, so I can voltage control the envelope level. There's a offset control on the envelope. And the cycle mode, you can toggle it. When cycle's active, if you apply a gate to cycle, you can turn it on and off.
Okay, like a gated cycling effect.
Right. Then there's a hold feature, so you get a track and hold. So let me cycle this again. So if I patch a gate into here, it's going to hold on the gate, and it's track and hold. It's not like the surge where it's like current controlled and where it picks up where it left off. This is like a true track and hold.
Okay.
So whether you're using the envelope or going into the slew, it's going to track that and hold whatever value is being sampled. So on top of that, this is where it gets crazy.
Okay.
So I'm going to switch over to this input and take out this hold. So there's another VCA, right? And by default, the positive envelope is normalized into that VCA. But you can also patch like an oscillator or an external signal into that VCA. And that gives you have a VCA out, and it's also an auxiliary envelope. And this has different modes depending on these switches here. So one of the coolest modes is this toggle mode. And so in green is the normal output of the envelope, and in blue you can see that every other envelope trigger, every other envelope cycle is inverting it. So you get like an LFO, kind of bipolar LFO thing based on the envelope is being flipped every other one.
Okay.
So if you have an external signal patched in there and you're controlling it with the envelope, you basically have a ring modulator or like a frequency divider that's based,
Okay.
Yeah. And this is where a lot of like, obviously this is good for modulation, but also it's great for audio rate.
Yeah. And having the range switch to actually be able to fine control the audio effects as well.
Yeah. Let me see if I can demo that, because that's cool to listen to. So right now we're in normal mode, not reset. But if I put it into reset,
we're getting like a nice hard sync effect. You've got a like waveform.
Say that again?
Like a nice hard sync, kind of like waveform tearing sound.
Yes. And so we're listening to the toggle. So this is just in normal mode, and this is in toggle where it's dividing.
And so this VCA can either just be on all the time, or it can be controlled by its own envelope. So if the envelope is being normalized, it's self-modulating itself, but if you patch an external oscillator in, the envelope will be controlling that, right?
Yeah.
And then it has a bias mode where the bias is going into the input, so you can take that signal and kind of fold it back in on itself.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Yeah, so wave shaping, oscillators, yeah.
Yeah, nice. So these are all 4 things you're currently working on. Like, what's the general plan for them coming out? Is this kind of the next 6 months, year ahead, we're going to start to see these?
Yeah. I mean, if I could have them made by tomorrow, I would. So
yeah, of course.
It's just a matter of me making them, yeah.
You click your fingers, they'd be out.
Right, exactly. And it is just me and 1 or 2 part-time people helping me, so yeah. But the plan is, this is for Christmas and the New Year.
Brilliant. And we'll talk about price nearer the time, maybe.
Yes.
It seems a bit early for that, but I'm really excited. I mean, those videos that we've done together on the Ultra Kick and the percussion and the steady state gate, they've done really well, and I hope people are starting to see and realize like how much is packed in there. That, as I say, it's one thing to make really densely designed gear, but it's really musical and accessible.
Yeah,
it's not dense just for the sake of throwing things in there. Like everything has an intention and a musical output.
Yeah, it could be a delicate balance sometimes, but so the focus is on that.
I mean, I'm looking forward to playing with them as they get ready.
Awesome.
That's great.
Yeah,
cool.
I'm excited.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah,
thanks a lot.